So this is the Town of Woodbridge Board of Finance regular monthly meeting. And today is Thursday, April 21st, 2022. The first item on our agenda is public comments. Do we have anything, Karen?
I don't have any via email, but Dr. Budd is here to make a comment.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You run your meetings very efficiently, so I don't want to take a lot of time, but I want to say that you'll hear later, I think, from Mr. Genovese about some really important, good conversations we've had today, continuing the good relationship between the Board of Education and the town in relation to medical insurance for next year. And on behalf of the Board of Education, I can say to you that we support the ideas that Mr. Genovese is going to propose to you this evening, and we would encourage your support of them for the continued strong relationship between the town and the board. You have an expert in Tony Genovese. It's great to work with him and Karen Crosby and the rest of the staff there. So thank you, and we appreciate in advance any support you might be able to give to Mr. Genovese's proposal tonight. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're going to hang around and listen?
You bet.
Okay, anything else, Karen?
No, I don't have any emails at all.
Okay. So with that, we will go to item 2, which is Administrative Officer, Director of Finance report. And that, of course, is the aforementioned Anthony Genovese.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay.
So I have some highlights for the period ending March of 2022. We have a healthy $672,000 surplus. As you all know, we have an allocation from $400,000 from our fund balance every year in the budget, which means that a $672,000 surplus would result in an actual increase of $272,000 to our fund balance, which would leave it just about $7 million or 13.55%. Some things to highlight: the Intergovernmental Revenue is a strong revenue producer this year. We have $163,000 in FEMA funds that we received. We also have a $15,000 pilot grant that we had not budgeted for that we received from the state of Connecticut. We have a surplus in education cost sharing grant of $23,000 and $255,000 in special education excess cost grant funds that we have in addition to our budget. So we're doing well in our intergovernmental revenue section. We do have a deficit in our investment income of $80,000, and that's due to continued low short-term rates, although they may be going up in the future. We'll see about that. And charge for services are doing well. We have a surplus of $20,000 in our transfer station fees. That's mainly due to the creation of the bulky waste per ton fee by the Board of Selectmen, and a surplus of $175,000 in building permits, and a small shortfall in the library and the other departments of about $17,000. So that results in a surplus of $177,000 in our charge for services. So that's where most of our surplus is from our revenue side of the budget. We have a few surplus some departments, mostly due to staffing. I'll just touch on some of the larger ones. Our building official has a surplus of $25,000, and most of it in his part-time wage account because he's part-time, formerly a full-time position, but now part-time. That is based on need and based on activity. So we have to budget for what we think the activity will be, and this year there happens to be a surplus. Transfer station, we're keeping a close eye on. There may be some slight deficit there. We're not sure yet, but if there is, we can use revenues, surplus revenues, to offset that. Human services and the library both have approximately $30,000 savings in wages. Both of those have to do with the coming back from COVID and the part-time staffing, and what the budget anticipated programming to be versus what program actually was in both of those departments. But I believe both of them are, particularly the library, is now pretty much back to pre-COVID. And finally, a small surplus in benefits of about $10,000. You're on mute.
You want to
Matt,
cover this?
Matt, you're still muted.
No, I'm not.
No, you're not.
It's better. I can hear you
want
now.
it now?
Yep.
Okay. I'm kind of far away from the mic. The Woodbridge Board of Ed financial report, am I seeing a surplus of 48,000? Anybody?
I knew that they had narrowed it. I don't remember. Was it 48,000, Tony?
Yeah, I'm looking right now. Yep, so the report we have here dated 4/1/22 has a surplus projected surplus of 48,604.
Okay, let's hope that holds up.
I did not include that in my projection, however, because that was,
That's good news.
yeah.
Okay. All right, so, anything else, other, Tony?
No, I don't have any other.
Okay. Then, of course, once again, I didn't print it. Approval of minutes, we have before us the minutes of March 17th, which was our regular monthly meeting, and I will move acceptance of the minutes of March 17th as presented.
I'll second.
Any corrections, adjustments, anything? Okay, hearing none. In favor, I'll do a roll call. Yes, Tom,
Yes.
Ellen,
yes.
Donovan,
Yes.
and Susan. Okay. The minutes are approved. Item 4 is the first selectman's report. Beth?
Thank you, Matt. Everyone can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. As you I hope know, the state of Connecticut awarded the town of Woodbridge $2 million to convert the old firehouse into a community center. This is a project we've been working on for a long time, and these state funds mean that the town will not have to borrow money to pay for the project. As we all know, the old firehouse burned and had a terrible fire in 2006, and I'm hopeful that the construction will begin this summer. I'm going to appoint a building committee to oversee the community center renovation project at our next Board of Selectmen meeting. We had a press conference with our legislators and Governor Lamont this past Monday in front of the building, and I believe there was a small story in the New Haven Register today. I haven't seen it yet about it with a photo, so good things. The next building that desperately needs renovations in our town center is the center building. Our police department needs remodeling and upgrades to conform with state standards, and the rest of the building needs new heating, ventilation, and cooling, along with other upgrades. To investigate these needs, I appointed a center building renovation committee with Board of Finance member Dwight Rowland serving as chair, Police Chief Frank Cappiello, Police Commissioner Andy Esposito, Human Services Director Jeanette Glixman, and Board of Selectmen member Paul Kyriakos. As experience has shown, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to fund all of these projects with either state or even federal funding, as long as we have a so-called shovel-ready project. And that's what we lucked out on with the last couple of things, the senior center and also the community center. We had them ready to go. We just had to find funding. So I've already reached out to our legislators and to hopefully apply for some Homeland Security funding toward the police department, because my understanding is they will fund anything that's called an emergency operations center, and it turns out our EOC is in the police department, so perhaps we can at least begin partial funding of that. The Board of Selectmen heard from a consultant named Laurie Petrie, she was recommended to us by the 2030 Task Force with a proposal to build upon the Plattis report from years ago for how to grow our commercial district. And as a reminder, the 2030 group of volunteers was charged with coming up with ways to grow our grand list. And the Board of Selectmen did approve funding the planner. It was in this year's budget, but we just voted to go forward with it, not the funding, but to move forward with her for recommendations for the business district. So that's very exciting. And then at our last meeting, just so you guys know, the Housing Committee requested and we agreed to table the discussion regarding development of the Country Club of Woodbridge until we receive their report. Arbor Haven has officially withdrawn their proposal at this time. We plan to put together a request for proposals for the property, and I hope that Arbor Haven might participate in that process along with other interested and qualified developers with any and all ideas. And that's the update from the Board of Selectmen. Any
That's it.
questions?
That's it, Beth?
That's it.
Okay. Next is liaison reports. I was unable to attend the most recent Amity meeting because it was beginning of April and I was working, of course. The only thing I will say, which I've observed, is there seems to be some real strong anti-Amity sentiment out there about I think a lot of it has to do with Jim Leahy putting in our paper and Orange's papers all about the surpluses and surpluses. So I don't know what's going to come of that, but we'll find out. I think it's May 3rd is the referendum, but there certainly is some concerns about the surpluses. So we'll see if it carries over into the vote at all. So with that, Ellen, you have anything? You're unmute.
I was at the police commission meeting on April 11th. They reported that they were on target for their budget as this year comes closer to an end. Also, motor vehicle accidents seem to have increased significantly over last year, and there will be a traffic study on Route 69 at Clark Road. And there was also really wonderful news that Brian Pedalino was promoted to sergeant. The commissioners voted unanimously for that promotion. I don't have all the details in front of me, but the chief's description of Brian and all that he's done was very impressive, and I think it's a very important and beneficial change at the police department. So if you see or know Brian, give him your congratulations. That was it.
Thank you, Tom.
We already talked about how the projected budget for the Beecher is now at positive 48, which is a very nice change from the start of the year. So Richard is keeping a close eye on what's happening for the remaining few months, but things are looking positive. Just not much to report other than at the Board of Ed meeting, there were some announced retirements with some fairly senior people, so that may help things. And then I think that the contract negotiations are starting to be discussed. The board went into executive session. One of the items on the agenda was that negotiation, I think. So we still have to figure out what the timing of that is and who will be perhaps a representative of the Board of Finance on that negotiation. Susan and I have been talking about it a little bit. I think the timing is going to be the question. So that's where we're at. Jonathan just messaged me that there's a plan for a joint session, I guess next month, possibly, to talk about contract negotiations. Because the last time when I did it, I was a representative of the town on that meeting, and I had been given some marching orders, and so hopefully we can have some discussion about what we would hope to see happen during that negotiation. Other than that, things are proceeding.
Thank you. Donovan.
Hey guys, so I was the last meeting I was at the engine 3, which is the newest fire truck, is out for a month and a half with a compressor problem, and they're open to taking the truck up to Massachusetts for servicing. They're planning a fundraising at the firehouse, actually May 21st, and a Lucas 2 device, the motherboard went. It's a Medic 24 device used to save lives. It needs replacing, and there is a loaner waiting. I think the guys are expecting to get a loaner on new Lucas devices. Beth touched on the $2 million grant for the firehouse project that will move forward. And we touched a little bit on the COVID restrictions have been relaxed a little bit, but they mentioned that COVID infection rates have been rising, so they'll be keeping an eye on that. Other than that, that's some of the most important things that we talked about. The other stuff was pretty not very important, pretty standard. Other than that, that's it.
Okay, thank you, sir. And finally, Susan.
I did not attend the library meeting because it was the same night as the preliminary hearing. And just for clarity, on the Woodbridge 2030 ad hoc committee, part of that, the planner is partly financed in this year's budget, and the balance of that contract is subject to approval in the upcoming budget. So just for clarity, I just wanted that out there.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, item 6 is the first item is a review of public hearing comments. Does Jerry want to step in here and handle that first one? Is he here?
I have called him 3 times. I've texted him. I don't know where he is.
Okay.
He said, I'll keep trying. I don't know, tried. So maybe put him at the end. I'll just keep going.
Yeah, we'll just move on to the next. Of course, we all, I don't think there were any major questions or major problems. The one thing I'd like to suggest to people, if you're going to come to a budget hearing and you have a question, like the scale. I mean, there's nothing wrong with giving Tony a heads up that you'd like to discuss the scale at the meeting. So he can't, obviously, as you see what he's got here, he can't possibly have these in his memory. So if there's really something you want to talk about at the town meeting or the budget hearing, you should really, rather than just ask and find out that there's no way we can answer it without doing some research, it wouldn't be a bad thing to give someone a heads up. So with that, the scale was one of the items that came up. And I think we all realized that. I kind of remembered it cost like $80,000, but I wasn't going to say that because I wasn't 100% sure. And I know that it's going to be a money saver as it appears here. But Tony, do you just want to run through this, what you did here?
You want to run through the scale first?
Yeah, go through this. What do you want to do first?
I'll do the scale first.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so the first sheet you have here is we'll go through the expenditures to install the scale. So the scale and the installation was 86,555. That's how much this installation and the scale costs. And we had to move a utility pole and some electrical, so that was 12,386. We had some site expenses, which were mainly blocks and other things that if you go up there, you'll see these blocks. That was 7140. And we had to rent an excavator for 6947. We originally had budgeted $103,000 for the scale. We went over budget by about $10,000, mainly because of those site expenses and the excavator rental. We had, we weren't sure what those costs were going to be until we actually got on site. We had a little bit of a contingency in the operating budget, but it didn't prove to be enough. We did fund those extra charges in the operating budget, so there was not a budgetary issue. So at $113,000 was the cost. There was a lot of paving done up there. I don't know if you've seen the paving that was done up at the transfer station, if you've been there. So that was about $61,000 in costs. Some of that was related to the scale. Some of that wasn't related to the scale necessarily. We took the opportunity to pave additional areas of the site. So, of the $61,000 in paving costs, some was related. We don't have exact figures on that. So I put that on this schedule just so you see how much that costs to do that. We did decide to move the location of the scale. We had a site plan that had the scale in one location, and when we got to the installation, it made more sense to move the scale a little. to the center of the facility for easier traffic flow and operation. So even if you include the 60, the 60,000, so far we've collected in revenues $175,000 in 2021 and 22.
Okay, so basically, I wouldn't get involved with the paving. Paving is something we needed up there anyway. So
yeah, I mean, some of it was necessary for the scale, some of it wasn't. So
basically, Tony, then it cost us a total of around 113, and we've generated 175,000, and we'll continue to generate. And the cost is not going up. Cost of 113 is fixed.
yeah, it's fixed. It's
Obviously.
finished. Yeah.
Obviously,
And the new thing was that we had budgeted. We thought we'd collect 112,000 in the first year. We only collected 60. One main reason was because the selectmen did not adopt a tip fee charge that year for bulky waste, which we thought they were going to do. So they didn't do that until this past year. So as a result, we thought we were going to have a turnaround in 1 year to collect, the main cost of the installation. It took maybe a little over 2 years to collect this amount of revenue necessary for the install in tip fees. We also were a little shy on our tip fee revenue projection in the first year, and there's a reason for that. If you turn to the next page, I put together a tonnage history. We had, and this is just municipal solid waste tonnage. So this is tonnage that comes in for basically garbage that we bring. So it comes into the transfer station and then goes into compactors 2 ways. It either comes in through haulers or people bring their own. So a lot of people bring their own garbage to the transfer station. That is still at the moment free, but the haulers were free for a long time. And then we instituted a tip fee, $90 per ton. And that was done in September of fiscal year 2020. So that'd be September of 2019. So you'll see fiscal year 2020 starts to drop in tip fee and tonnage. And if you look at the monthlies, it correlates pretty much with when we adopted the fee. And then you'll see 2021 is 1,800 tons. So we went from 2,700 tons, 2,800 tons. You'll see 3 years in a row there, it's roughly the same amount. And if you go back further, it's roughly 2,800 tons for a long time. We dropped to 2,100 tons in 2020, 1,800 tons in 2021, and we're up about 2,000 tons for the current year. So there's definitely been a drop in tonnage. So I just did this little sort of exercise here where if you had the scenario number 1 on the sheet is status quo, if we had just not done the scale and we didn't see a drop in tonnage, that'd be approximately what we would have spent each year. And then I put what we actually spent. And you can see there's a dramatic difference in what we actually subsidized in taxes based on those 2 scenarios. So it's not just
question. The
it's
scale
not
was
just revenue collection, it's the fact that the tonnage has dropped. So
the scale was an excellent investment.
Yeah, so far it's so good.
Yep.
And we're we're going to start collecting a per ton fee for bulky waste. And the reason for a lot of this is we anticipate there's going to be a somewhat of a garbage crisis as burn plants start to close. I think the burn plant in Bridgeport's got to be at least 40 years old. So as the burn plants start to close, I know there's issues with the one in Hartford. It's becoming more difficult to find a place to relocate those. So if you can't, because nobody wants it in their town, you have to truck the garbage out of state, which becomes a lot more expensive. So that's sort of the problem that's starting to develop. So we're trying to use a strategy of, tip fees to encourage folks to not throw away as much stuff, recycling, push our recycling up, and maybe some other creative ways like diverting the food waste out of the waste stream that's very heavy. And we have a bunch of other strategies to try to head off this increase. So.
Okay, that's very informative.
Sorry, just one thing. Can you remind us what the town pays to haul off per ton?
Yeah, the tip fee right now is $65.75. $65.75.
That's what the town pays.
Yeah, that's what the town pays. The recycling tip fee is about $40 a ton, a little less, I think $35 a ton, somewhere around there. So the recycling tip fee has come down significantly as some of the products have come back in their value. So
It's nice to see, because at one point, right, a year or two ago, it was
like
flipped.
$80 a ton.
Yeah, for recycles.
Recycling, yeah. It was like higher than the garbage,
Yeah.
basically. Right. So now it's come down to a little less than 40 and it's stabilized. So that's good. When we first started doing this, we used to actually receive about $15 a ton for recycling. So
If we could only get to that again, right?
at least get to a point where it doesn't cost us anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, there was also, excuse me.
Yeah.
Tony, does that include folks who pay for private garbage pickup? Does that?
Yeah, so folks who pay for private garbage, those are the haulers that pay $90 a ton to dump it at the transfer station. So they used to not pay anything to come to our transfer station. They had to pay a registration fee, a small registration fee. But before fiscal year 2020, there was no charge for a hauler to dump at the transfer station. So we instituted that for a few reasons. First, to track our garbage, because we wanted to make sure what was coming into the transfer station is what we were getting charged in Bridgeport to dispose of. Make sure those two balance, and we weren't, paying for someone else's waste. And also to all the other towns around us were charging $90, $100. Matter of fact, I think Orange has increased it to $200, if I'm not mistaken, since we've done ours. So we're at 90 currently.
Any other questions on the scale? Okay, there was also, I'm trying to think in order of the questions. There was also a question about the surplus, the Amity surplus, which that's got to be taken up with Amity. We have no control over that. It's been well documented and well written by, again, that Jim Leahy from Orange about the surpluses. But as I said, it's well documented in our meetings. It's transparent, and we get a lot of money back. So I understand. It would be nice to have, no surplus but understand that these people at Amity, if the last thing they want to have happen is they come up short by $1 million or something, because then they're going to be have to go to a town meeting and referendums and all that. So they're very careful not to come up short. So again, that was a question for Amity, and then there was a question about the 10%, and I see that Attorney Weiner is with us, and I guess he's going to address this.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Matt.
Thank you.
So I did hear that question from the Republican town chairman at the meeting, and I'd like to give you just a very short summary of what the issues are regarding the 8-30G applications. It's a simple it's not a simple statute, it's a long statute. It has significant ramifications, and it is subtle in terms of trying to figure out for a layperson what it actually means. And I'm going to try and do my best to make it as simple as possible. Lawyers, when they look at 8-30G, they'll recognize that what it does is it clearly shifts the burden of proof on appeals from zoning commission decisions throughout the state. Ordinarily, in your traditional zoning application, a developer, for example, may want to put a house on an 1.5 acre lot in Woodbridge, market rate, no affordable housing, goes before planning and zoning. He may need variances, he may need inland wetlands permissions. And for whatever reason, the local zoning boards deny his application. He then has to decide whether he abandons the project or he goes to court and appeals it. If he goes to court and appeals it, the burden on proving that the zoning commission made a mistake is on the developer. So the developer and his lawyer goes to court, they have to get up and they have to convince a judge as to why they should be permitted to go forward with the project, and for the judge to overturn the decision of the planning commissions. That is a very difficult burden on the part of a developer to prove that the commission made a mistake or made an error. He has to prove that they were arbitrary, capricious, or had no basis in law for the decision they made when they turned down that developer's application. It is accepted law on the part of lawyers who do zoning work that it is very difficult to win a zoning case if you're a developer and you get turned down by local commissions. Not impossible, but extremely difficult. Therefore, there are very few appeals by developers of these decisions, and of those that do appeal, very few are successful. So that's the traditional kind of appeals and burdens that a developer has in any town to try and get a project reversed from the decisions of a local zoning commission. The legislature, whether you agree or disagree, decided many, many years ago that that burden on developers was so severe that it impeded the development of affordable and multifamily housing, because most zoning commissions had a preference to deny those types of projects in our various towns in Connecticut. And once those projects were denied, the developer without 8-30G, prior to 8-30G, would have that same burden of a traditional kind of an appeal that I just described. He would have the burden of proof. He'd have to show the zoning commission was arbitrary, capricious. So he would probably, in most cases, lose his ability to build affordable housing, multifamily housing in a particular town. Along came 8-30G, which reversed the procedure and reversed the burdens. The legislature said, we want to encourage multifamily affordable housing in towns, and therefore we're going to make it a little easier and more difficult for towns to deny applications and easier for developers to prevail and appeal. So they reversed the burden of proof. Now when the developer appeals a denial of an affordable housing project under 8-30G, the developer goes to court and essentially doesn't have to say anything. The burden goes to the town. The planning commission must prove to a judge that the decision it made in denying that affordable housing application was done consistent with health, safety, welfare of its communities. And those are things that make up health, safety, and welfare of the community are flooding, traffic, environmental issues, the typical issues that you would hear in any zoning case. But now the burden is on the town to show that it acted properly and was consistent with health, safety, and welfare, and some other standards that go along with that. So the developer and his lawyer sit there in this case, rather than have to get up and prove to a judge that the decision was wrong. The town now has to get up and prove that the decision was correct. And that's an added burden that makes it much more difficult for zoning commissions to successfully turn down applications for affordable housing and multifamily housing. So many towns in Connecticut have this sword hanging over their heads that unless they get to 10%, and if you get to 10% of your housing stock being affordable, then the burden goes back to the way it was before 8-30G. Then the developer again has the burden, and the developer will be less likely to take those kind of cases on an appeal. If you don't have the 10%, such as Woodbridge, we have under 2%, which is among the lowest affordable units in the state. We now are under the burden of proving why that developer should not be allowed to proceed with a project. And that's a high standard, that's a high burden. And in many cases, the town will lose. So the town has to be mindful when it does get applications for for affordable housing, that it has not met the 10% benchmark. It is way, way, way below the 10% benchmark. It could be that developers now see an opportunity in Woodbridge to come in and try and get these projects approved, whereas it used to be very difficult. Now it's not going to be so difficult, and Woodbridge is really down at the bottom of towns that have affordable housing stock. So while it's a subtle argument, it's clear that this is something that could happen at any time to Woodbridge. Yes, it's possible that no developer ever comes into town with a 10% application. but it is also possible that one may, many may, and who knows how many could find property in Woodbridge that they think is compatible with affordable housing. So it is incumbent on every town, not only Woodbridge, every town to get as close to try and achieve that 10% level so it can control the kind of development it wants in town. And if you're not there, then the developers really have a bigger say in what they want to build in this town. So that's just the general concept of 8-30G, and that's the penalty. It really is no penalty. It doesn't say in the statute that the town will be penalized. What it does say is it makes it very difficult for the town to sustain a denial of a developer's project, whether it's 10 units, 15 units, 100, 150, 200 units. It's going to be much more difficult for the town to measure whether that is a project that it would like to see proceed in the town. There's something that we never talk about in 8-30G, and I think I would like to mention it. There's a provision in that statute which allows towns to apply for moratoriums. In other words, the legislature recognized that there may be some towns that have difficulty, if not impossibilities, to reach that 10% level. And Woodbridge is probably in that category. We're so low, we have such small available amounts of land that it's going to be quite difficult to get to that 10%. That doesn't mean we have to abandon all efforts to reach that 10% level, because if you make progress, if you can show that you've made progress, and there's a standards and there's points that you get for every type of affordable housing, multifamily housing that you allow in town, and you don't reach the 10%, if you reach a certain numerical number of points, you're eligible to get a moratorium for 4 years, for up to 4 years, and during that period of time, if you establish that you've made strides in getting to the 10%, but have not made the 10%, you might be at 4%, you might be at 5%, you can apply for the moratorium, and you'll likely get the moratorium, which gives you a 4-year reprieve and an effort to go back and look at your regulations and see whether you want to make some changes, see what kind of plans you might have available to develop. And it sort of takes the pressure off the town and takes the incentive off the developer to come into town during that moratorium period. So while everybody says, and we recognize that it's going to be very hard for us to reach 10%, that doesn't mean we shouldn't at least try to increase our stock. So we might be eligible for the moratorium, or who knows, we have a couple projects that in the appropriate areas of town might get us to a significant amount of affordable housing units, multifamily units, where we don't have to be concerned with 8-30G. So in addition to 8-30G, another penalty, another problem with not having enough affordable housing, and this issue was raised by the Open Communities Alliance that filed an application charging that Woodbridge's zoning regulations were exclusionary, is that there was an allegation made that we violate the fair housing standards in the state of Connecticut Constitution, and that we are not affording ample opportunities for everyone to come to town, regardless of income. And it is possible that somebody out there, because Open Communities was talking about it, could sue the town, and the town could be susceptible to monetary damages, and it could be a lot of monetary damages. And at the very least, we'd have to spend a lot of money defending those kind of cases. So overall, there is a really good legal reason to strive to obtain significantly more of multifamily affordable housing, and we made the first step. The Planning and Zoning Commission, in response to Open Communities Alliance, did do admirable work in amending our regulations, which now allows for multifamily affordable housing in many areas of the town, which is a good step in the right direction. So there we have it. And if you have any questions, be happy to answer.
I'm so glad you explained that, Jerry. There was no way. Thank you.
Well, I hope it's it's a subtle, difficult legal argument, and most people are not aware of it, and they shouldn't be aware of it. Most lawyers do know it, but it's there, and it's hanging over all the towns in Connecticut's heads to make sure we make some progress in this area.
Jerry, can I just add one quick question? The statute that refers to, the burden of proof shifting to the town,
Yeah.
that's just for affordable housing, right? Not like a development that includes a portion of affordable housing.
Well, no, it could be applicable if they want to include some affordable housing. It doesn't have to be 100% affordable housing, as far as I know. And I'm not saying that with 100 degree of certainty, but I do believe if it contains some element of affordable housing, I think they can take advantage of the 8-30G statute.
For the affordable housing piece or for the whole?
The whole project, I think. For the
Okay.
whole project. Again, I don't want to. I want to have some caveat on that. Not 100% sure. It's a great question, but I do think it still comes under that statute.
Thank you.
And I'll try and get the answer for you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
No, I just want to say thank you. That was very clear. And I've looked at 830G a million times, so thanks, Jerry.
I think that's what it does, hopefully. All righty.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you all. See ya.
Okay, continuing on with our public hearing comments, we covered the scale, we covered the surpluses and amity. There was also, this one kind of got me, but anyway, there was a question about, are we really doing a good job of controlling the amount of personnel we have? Are we reviewing positions? And my God, if anybody knows what's going on in this town, you know that between the people in charge, Tony and Beth and whoever, we've eliminated positions over the past years. So Tony put together this list, and I think, people might think that we have, hundreds of full-time workers in this town. But if you read this list, or if you read this narrative, from 2017 to 2022, the town reduced full-time staff by 10, or 11.36%, from 88 to 78 full-time positions. We have 78 full-time people in Woodbridge. Now, if you consider that the police department has perhaps 30, we're down to 48. If you consider that the public works probably has 15, we're down to 33. So when you think about running this town, and I'm sure running this town with 33 full-time people, and you don't have to go very far. You walk into town hall, you've got up at the front, you've got the person who's Tony, who greets people. Tax collector's office, 2 people. Assessor, 2 people. The finance department, 3 people. You go downstairs to town clerk, I believe there's 1 maybe full-timer and the rest are all part-timers. So to suggest that we need to review this and look, it's been done on and on and on and on. It's constantly being done. And anybody who thinks that 78 full-time positions, including the police, including public works, to run this town is a lot of people. I mean, I think everybody does what they have to do to get this done. And Tony gave us some positions that have been eliminated, clerks and police officers, and adding a grant officer, eliminating a police lieutenant, eliminating a payroll clerk. The building official was changed to part-time. Grants coordinator was eliminated, mechanic eliminated. So the town is very, very, very finely run, and run on a very, very lean basis. We really don't have a tremendous number of people. Again, think about it. 78 full-time people to run this, including police and public works. So that suggestion kind of irked me a little bit, I'll be honest with you, but it was as if we don't know what we're doing, or the town doesn't know what it's doing. It just has, people sitting around playing solitaire all day long. And so the truth of the matter is, Woodbridge runs a very solid, lean operation, and they get a lot of work done without a whole lot of people. So that was that statement. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
Matt, I just want to make a comment that we regularly do succession planning. We regularly discuss different ways to deliver services, different ways to organize the departments. I know Beth and Betsy and I on a regular basis do that in conjunction with some department heads. So it's just a process that's continual.
Okay.
Yeah.
There were also a number of remarks about class size, that it should be 25. Just everybody should be 25. And again, anybody who knows the way the budget works, we can't, Board of Finance, the town cannot dictate to boards of education what their class size is. That's up to the Board of Education to have a class size policy. So again, to bring that up at the meeting, one guy said it for both, and I was surprised to learn he was a former member of the Board of Ed, so he should know very clearly that it's not up to us to dictate class size. It's up to the boards of education too. So, but that was brought up. Was there anything else? That was pretty much the most common things that were brought up. Anything else anybody else heard that they want to bring up? No, I think that pretty much covers it. So, okay, so I think honestly, I mean, I don't believe that anything we heard the other night would cause us to change the budget we presented, and that's what I would suggest. And we can probably we'll make a motion and to recommend this to the town meeting. But in the meantime, Tony's got some additional budget considerations based on some changes in medical insurance, which is why Dr. Budd is with us to hear this. But so ahead, we all got this sheet, I'm assuming. So Tony, why don't you go over this?
Sure. There are 5 suggested changes to your to the preliminary budget, and none of which change the mill rate, none of which change the total amount collected in taxes. It's just so I'll go through those. The first is to add to the capital budget $275,000 in for the human services to use American Rescue Plan funds to fund HVAC improvements at the senior center. That was reviewed and recommended by the Board of Selectmen at their last meeting. So that's the first suggested change. You should have received a letter from Jeanette about that.
Mhm.
Second, suggested changes are for years, not for 2023, but 24, 25, and 26, to add $35,000 in each of those years to possibly at least purchase some air packs for the fire department. And the third change is for $80,000 in 24, 25, and 26 for possibly at least purchase radios in the fire department. These are just for outer years, not necessarily in the 2023 budget, but we wanted to get those in the budget. And then the last 2 are related to healthcare. So the town and the Woodridge Board of Education are historically have been a part of the same health plan. This year, the Woodbridge Board of Education had explored some other options that were available to them and not to us, and due to some mainly due to some contractual language. And so their other option, which was a state plan, would have saved them about $100,000. But if we split and we stayed with our current carrier, that would cost us about $80,000. So net, it's almost a wash. But the so if the Woodbridge Board of Education, as we discussed it, and they were amenable to staying with our current carrier, which would of course save us $80,000, right? Because if we both combine together, it's a 0 increase for our healthcare. So the town would save $80,000 because we have about 2.5% increase in our budget. That would cost them an additional $80,000 to $100,000, however. So over that other option. So as a result, what we'd like to do is to reduce the town fringe benefits section by $80,000 to reflect the savings that we'll realize by staying with the Board of Ed and being at a 0% increase, and add $80,000 to the Woodbridge Board of Education budget because of the increased costs that they'll have for staying with us because they had a cheaper option. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that clearly?
Tony, I'm so glad you, because I looked at those 2 items. I thought, what a coincidence. We say 80, they get 80. That was amazing.
Theirs is closer to 100, But the board, Dr. Bud said they would be able to absorb the additional $20,000 so that we could all stay on the same plan, all be part of the same, with the same plan, the same broker for the upcoming year.
So
That's
might
just-
it be in the future for the town and the school to go to the state plan, or that's not available to the town?
So we have negotiations coming up in our contracts are up next June 30th. And as you heard, the Board of Ed is currently in their process. I think theirs are up roughly the same time, but their clock is a little different than ours. We start negotiating January 1st. So that is a possibility for us next year, absolutely. And we will investigate all options available to us for our healthcare, of which that is one. And so.
If I could just ask a couple questions. I think one of the issues for the Board of Ed was that the contractual language, and someone can correct me if I misspeak, basically says that the Board of Ed can make changes to health insurance as long as they were providing equal or better.
Ours is equal or better. Theirs is, I think, something like comparable to, or yeah. Their language is a little more flexible than our language.
So presumably in the future, we'll try to make it flexible to allow.
Right, that's part of our negotiations, right?
And then again, I think, just so I understand this whole, 80 down and 80 up sort of thing, my assumption, and maybe I'm wrong, is that if the Board of Ed goes off on their own for health insurance, then our insurance pool for the town shrinks, so that may increase our
costs.
Our premiums. Is that really where the savings
That's
are coming
basically it. Yep. If they go off on their own, our size of our pool shrinks, which means that our increase next year is 2.5% and not 0%. I've included 2.5% in our budget. So that's why we were able to reduce it, because our increase goes to 0%.
Okay.
Because they're staying with us. But for them to stay with us and not go to the state plan, they have to pay an extra, say, $100,000.
Right. Yeah, because that's one of the things that the Board of Ed did, which I thought was a good thing, was to try to reduce their budget request by looking into healthcare and found the cheaper rates. But I was a little concerned about the fact that then we have two very small pools.
Right.
Now we have one small pool, not two very small pools. So it was a good idea.
Any other comments on these 5 items? Because I'm going to incorporate these into our recommendation for the annual town meeting.
Sorry, I do have one question. On the HVAC for the senior center, it just occurred to me because we were talking about when the town meeting might be able to move back into the center gym. But we know the ventilation in the center gym is, shall we say, not quite adequate right now.
Right.
Does that 275 include?
Does not. That's just for the senior center.
Does it, and I don't want to mess up the waters at all, but does it make sense to have, I don't know whether it makes.
We have a plan to possibly use the American Rescue Plan funds for the ventilation in the gym. That's on the list for us to do that. The reason why we wanted to include this in the capital budget now is because when you use American Rescue Plan funds, you have to follow your appropriations process. For us, that means that we have to have it in a town meeting. If it's a capital appropriation over X dollars, Ellen remembers this from the charter, and how everything over a certain dollar has to be right. So because the senior center plans are finished, and because the project is pretty much ready to go out to bid, we still have a little bit more to go with the American Rescue Plan projects. We have to, we want to identify more projects. We have to do some public outreach. The selectmen are currently putting together a strategic plan, which they hope to then use to guide some of the funding use of the American Rescue Plan funds. So we will probably have a town meeting at some point in the future to go over some of these and to recommend some of these projects. We want to do some public outreach as well on this. So
I'm rather astonished that gyms have heat or air conditioning. What?
Usually, but not back in the days when they built center.
I mean, well, okay, never mind.
There's only one door into the gym and the ventilation is terrible.
Right.
We need ventilation in the
guess-
gym, whether you put heat.
You need air movement, but
Right.
not heat and air conditioning. That's why God invented shorts, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But the only thing and I don't, and I mean, I'm for, you know, better ventilation in the senior center. So I'm not suggesting that shouldn't happen. I just wonder, and because maybe I saw the plans and I can't remember it, but I'm a little concerned that if we put in, you know, the new HVAC for the senior center, and then we have to put in a completely separate one for the rest of the building, does that just increase the complexity? Or whether there's a way that as we put in the new HVAC for the senior center, it can be designed in a way that should we decide to, you know, turn it into a bigger system for the whole building.
So
But
that's a good question. We've actually reviewed this issue with our design professional and our engineers that we've had working on the project. And in fact, they're recommending for the center building, distinct separate units for the gym, the senior center, and the rest of the building because of the construction of the building and the fact that it's sort of 3 different parts.
never mind, I didn't say anything. Tony yet again is ahead of us on all of this. So thank you.
Good question. We had the same question. We thought we were going to put one big, you know, one big system in, but.
Any other comments? Okay, so with that, I am going to make a motion that we recommend to the annual town meeting the budget numbers that we presented originally, incorporating these 5 changes, which will not change the number at all. So that is the number I would recommend we go to the annual town meeting with.
Second,
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Yes. Tom?
Yes.
Susan, go ahead, you're dying there.
yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Donovan?
Yes.
Okay, so it's unanimous. Anything else you'd like to discuss tonight?
One other thing to mention, and that is the fate of the auto tax, the auto mill rate cap in Hartford, and whether or not that happens, and if it does happen, whether or not we get any money back from it, both of which are questionable at this point. So we'll just I'll keep you updated on that, and you know, once we have more information, you know, we'll evaluate it at that time.
Okay, I don't seem to hear them talking about it as much. They talk about a lot of things, but I haven't heard them bring that up. Again, it's for us, it's what, 15 mils? 44?
Well, it depends. There's 2 different proposals. One's 29 and one's, I think appropriations was 32, maybe somewhere in that neighborhood.
I know it's a lot of people think it probably is fair, but it's a logistical nightmare. And it's also, like you said, the possibility is that we charge all our motor vehicles at 29.
And then we're not going to get the reimbursement. We won't be reimbursed. At least, you know, that's not, you know, a long-term strategy.
I have a question for, go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say on this, let's say the worst happens and the legislature drops the the maximum mill rate for automobiles down to well below what we have. Would that, depending on when they do that, does that impact the town meeting for the budget, or is the funds, is that something we take out of contingency to make up for the loss of revenue?
So it depends on the loss, how much revenue is lost, and the timing of when it's voted on. And we'll have to evaluate the amount. You know, if it's a certain amount, that's why you have a fund balance for things like this. But if we can incorporate it for the town meeting, we will. And I think the session's it's next week, I think, right? Or the week after.
We're going to find out.
Tony, are there municipalities that want this? And is CCM advocating for or against it, or cost? These are the
CCM's sort of neutral on it. I think only thing CCM is advocating for is if you do it, you need to fund it.
Mhm.
But I think they're skeptical as the rest of us are that's funding is a long-term strategy is going to happen. Yeah. So I think they've been sort of, at least they haven't been aggressive on that as other issues.
Mhm.
Can I just say one other thing real quick? I just want to commend Tony and his group, Karen, everybody. I thought the just the numbers was a great document. It really was very clear and useful. I thought the PowerPoint was very helpful and really well presented. I thought everybody did a terrific job. I want to commend those who asked, made constructive criticisms, and there was also constructive praise for the process that we all ignore, but it was there. So it was a really nicely done preliminary budget meeting. I just want to commend those who put all that work into it.
Definitely, definitely.
So now that you said, I have one other thing then, is that available on our website? Because there weren't that many people there. And
Yes.
Tony doing the presentation is. Yeah, okay, great, good. Well, we should make sure people know that so they can watch.
We'll put I'm not sure if the video is up there yet. We'll put that up, but I know the just the numbers is up there. The link to
great.
the online budget book is up there, and the pamphlet that was sent in the mail is up there.
Yeah.
The one that's not
Great.
up there is probably the video, which we should put a link to.
I believe the meeting is channel 79. I saw it when I was scanning through trying to fall asleep last night. It's up there.
Did it work or did it not work?
Yeah, let's not go there.
On that.
Don't go there.
Sometimes you're like, oh no, please wake me up.
And
It is up. You know,
one thing I'd like to put a plea in for is between now and the annual town meeting, if there can be some discussion about how if we get, or when we get more than 250 people, how we're going to counter some of the concerns at the last town meeting about the fact that the counting of votes was suggested was inaccurate, even though we know it wasn't inaccurate, that maybe there can be some discussion as to how we will actually conduct. I don't know who, is it the Board of Finance who conducts that meeting? It's the town, right?
That's town meeting.
right.
So I just think we need to do a little bit of work up front, at least on that score, so that we don't have people standing up and yelling that the count is inaccurate.
You may not be, I was just going to say whether it's accurate or not. Sometimes some people just yell.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna do our best. Thank you. We'll just do our best.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
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 Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Aye. Thanks, everybody.
I think